Okay, the very last video of this unit is just some odds and ends. And this is the last section in your notes for this unit as well. So there's 4 things that are covered in the notes, so I'm not going to go into all of them in details in this video. So the first one is printf and scanf instead of fprintf and fscanf, but we've already seen that. We've been using that. That's cool. Reading to the end of a file. We haven't really talked about that yet, although you kind of have the tools that you need to do it, so I am going to talk about that a bit. Then reading white space, and that's really about if you do a scanf with %C. Remember, we talked about that if you just do this, then it'll read in that white space character into C, and if you put a space, then it'll skip white space and read the first non-white space character. So sometimes you want to actually know whether there's spaces or new lines, and then you would not put a space there, and then that's what you can do. And then the last thing is kind of cool, but also not always something that we need to be doing, is reading and writing to and from strings. So there's 2 functions, sprintf and scanf, which essentially allow you to do the same thing as fprintf and fscanf, but instead of reading and writing from the terminal or from a file, it's going to read and write to a string. So you can have a string that has some kind of formatted output. Instead of putting that on the screen, you can put it into a string. That's useful sometimes, but usually we can just directly write things or read things from a file or from the terminal. Okay, so this second topic I want to talk about a little bit, and in order to do that, let's look at an example. So here's my example where we want to read to the end of a file. It's a simple program that is reading in a file name and opening it, and then trying to read in words in that file until we get to the end, and then to say how many words are in there. So it's similar to what you had to do for Lab 4, except it's not relying on like asterisks or not relying on knowing the count of how many lines are in the file to begin with. It's just trying to read until it gets to the end. And you might guess that this kind of works in a way, but in an important way, it doesn't work at all. So let's check it out. If I do make numWords, I mistyped it. There we go. So I compile, then I run, and if I give it the name of the Alice in Wonderland file from our last lab, we get an error. So what happened is that this read string is just going to keep trying to read, and then it'll read off the end of the file, and it'll abort the program with an error, rather than what we want to do is like stop at that point and so that we can get down here. And so, as you might guess, when we use fscanf, we actually can do that. So we can say if fscanf f in %s words. So that's the function to read in instead of using read string, using fscanf. But how can we check whether this worked? Well, we could check if it's equal to 1. That's if things worked as expected. But we can also check this special return value of EOF to say that it's at the end of a file. You see that got highlighted specially because it's a special keyword. And in that case, we will just break out of the loop. So it's going to try to read a word now, but if it doesn't work, it's going to break out of the loop. And so now we can try this again. And you see now it actually works. Of course, that's not the same count that you would have gotten from Lab 1, again, because it's not doing all that complicated, cool stuff with the asterisks. It's just looking for the total number of words in any file. And in fact, this is a common thing that this should feel kind of weird to you to have while true and then this if with the break. We can put that condition right in the while loop itself, but we're just going to switch it around. So while we successfully read in a word, and what does it mean to successfully read it in is that fscanf returns 1, then we'll just keep counting up. So this is now a while loop that is reading every single word in the file and entering the loop once for every single word in this file. Because it's trying to read a word from f in, and it's only going to keep going through the loop if that returns 1 to say that it successfully read one word. So this will now work correctly. And just to give us some practice, let's think real quick and pause maybe and think about what you would do to make this work without IC210.h. Okay, so if we don't want that, then we're definitely doing some I/O. So we need that. We need string.h probably. Actually, we might not, but it doesn't hurt to include it. And we were using a bool. We're not anymore, but anyway, let's go ahead and include standard bool.h. And we definitely need our type def for C-string. So that's the definitions that we need, and then we should check. I don't think there's any other remaining special functions that were being used because we changed to scanf and printf. But this stream, that's not a type anymore, so we have to change that to file star. And I think with that, we'll have a program that works completely without the use of IC210.h. Okay, so that's how you read to the end of a file without having to know how much is in the file or without having like a special thing like asterisks to tell you when to stop reading.